A tornado destroyed my house. With nothing left, I ran to my son's house. He blocked the door while his fiancée screamed, "We don't want you here! Let the government deal with homeless people!" I spent the night at the train station. The next morning, I saw a deaf boy about to jump onto the tracks. I was the only one who could save him, communicating in sign language. His billionaire father saw everything. What he did next just changed everything. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Marianne, and at 64 years old, I thought I understood what loss felt like. I was wrong. The tornado hit Millfield on a Tuesday evening in March. I was in my kitchen, preparing dinner for one as I had for the past 8 years since Harold passed, when the sirens began wailing. The sound cut through the quiet of my small house like a knife through fabric. I'd lived through storms before, but something about this one felt different. The air itself seemed to vibrate with malice. I grabbed my emergency bag and headed for the basement, my arthritic knees protesting with each step down the wooden stairs. The house groaned above me, timbers creaking under the pressure of winds I couldn't even see yet. I huddled in the corner where Harold had built a small shelter years ago, clutching the photo of Paul from his college graduation. My only child, my pride and joy, smiling in his cap and gown. The noise was indescribable. It wasn't just wind. It was like the earth itself was screaming. The house shuddered, and I heard things breaking above me. Glass shattering, wood splintering, my life being torn apart piece by piece. I pressed the photo closer to my chest and whispered prayers I hadn't said since Harold's funeral. When the silence finally came, it was almost worse than the noise. I waited in that basement for what felt like hours, afraid to go upstairs, afraid of what I'd find. When I finally climbed those steps, my legs shaking from more than just the cold, I emerged into what used to be my kitchen. The roof was gone. The walls on the north side had collapsed inward, and my refrigerator sat in what used to be my living room, crushed under a massive oak tree that had stood in my yard for longer than I'd been alive. Rain was already starting to fall through the gaping hole where my ceiling used to be, soaking the family photos scattered across the debris. I stood there in my destroyed home, water dripping onto my shoulders, and tried to process what had happened. 64 years of life, 36 years in this house, and it was all gone. The quilt my mother made for my wedding, the china set Harold surprised me with on our 10th anniversary, the rocking chair where I'd nursed Paul as a baby. All of it was either destroyed or buried under rubble. My neighbors were in the same situation. Mrs. Patterson from next door was standing in her yard, staring at what remained of her garage. The Hendersons' house was completely gone, just a foundation where a home used to be. Emergency vehicles were already arriving, their red and blue lights painting our devastation in harsh, flashing colors. A Red Cross volunteer, a young woman with kind eyes and a clipboard, approached me as I stood in my doorway. "Ma'am, do you have somewhere to stay tonight? Family nearby?" Paul. Of course Paul would help me. My son lived just 2 hours away in the city with his fiancée Salem. He was a successful accountant, owned a beautiful house in a nice neighborhood. He'd take care of his mother. Family takes care of family, right? "Yes," I told the volunteer, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "My son. I can stay with my son." I managed to salvage a few things from the wreckage. Some clothes that weren't too damaged, my purse, that photo of Paul, and the small jewelry box that had belonged to my grandmother. Everything fit into 2 garbage bags, which seemed impossible. How could an entire life fit into 2 garbage bags? The drive to Paul's house was surreal. The tornado had carved a path of destruction through our town, but just 20 miles south, it was as if nothing had happened. The sun was setting peacefully, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. Normal people were coming home from normal jobs to normal houses that still had roofs. Paul's house sat in a development called Willowbrook Estates. All the houses looked similar. Large, new, with perfectly manicured lawns and 2-car garages. His was a colonial style, painted pale blue with white trim. Salem's BMW sat in the driveway next to Paul's Honda. They were both home. I rang the doorbell with trembling fingers, still wearing the clothes I'd put on that morning, now dirty and torn from digging through debris. When the door opened, it wasn't Paul who answered. It was Salem. Salem was 28, 12 years younger than Paul, with the kind of blonde hair that came from an expensive salon and makeup that never seemed to smudge, even at the end of the day. She was wearing white jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. When she saw me standing there with my garbage bags, her perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together in what I first mistook for concern. "Marianne? What are you doing here?" "Salem, honey. There was a tornado. My house is gone. Everything's gone. I need—" "Paul!" she called over her shoulder, not taking her eyes off me. "Your mother's here." I heard his footsteps before I saw him. My son appeared behind Salem, still wearing his work shirt and tie, though he'd loosened it. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw relief in his eyes. Relief that I was alive, that I was safe. But then Salem touched his arm, and something in his expression changed. "Mom, what happened? You look terrible." "The tornado hit Millfield. The house is completely destroyed, Paul. I lost everything." My voice cracked on the last word. "I need somewhere to stay, just until I can figure out what to do next. The insurance adjuster won't be able to assess anything until next week at the earliest." Paul looked at Salem and she looked at him, and in that exchange, I felt my heart begin to break in a way that had nothing to do with losing material possessions. "Mom, this really isn't a good time," Paul said slowly. "Salem's parents are flying in tomorrow for our engagement party. We've got guests coming, caterers. It's going to be crazy around here. I won't be in the way," I said quickly. "I can sleep on the couch. I won't even—" "Absolutely not," Salem interrupted, her voice sharp. "We can't have you here looking like that when my parents arrive. They don't know about your situation." "My situation." I stared at her, trying to understand. "What situation?" "You know," she said, waving her hand vaguely. "Living alone in that little house, working at the grocery store until you retired. My parents are very successful people, Marianne. My father owns 3 car dealerships. They have certain expectations." Paul put his hand on Salem's shoulder, a gesture that was supposed to be calming but felt like choosing sides. "What Salem means is that we've painted a certain picture of our families. Her parents think you live comfortably, maybe in a nice retirement community. So you're ashamed of me." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "It's not about shame," Paul said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's about timing. Look, I can give you money for a hotel room. There's a nice Holiday Inn about 10 minutes from here. You can stay there while you sort things out. Money for a hotel room." I stood there on my son's doorstep, everything I owned in 2 garbage bags, and he was offering to pay for me to stay somewhere else rather than let me sleep on his couch. "How long have you been planning this engagement party?" I asked quietly. Paul shifted uncomfortably. "About 2 months. We sent out invitations 3 weeks ago. And you didn't invite me." Salem laughed, actually laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Marianne, be realistic. This is a sophisticated affair. Cocktails and canapes, important people from Paul's firm. It's not really your scene." "Not my scene. My son was getting engaged. And it wasn't my scene." I looked at Paul, really looked at him, and tried to see the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who cried when his goldfish died, who told me I was the best mom in the world when I surprised him with homemade cookies after school. But all I saw was a stranger in an expensive shirt, standing next to a woman who saw me as an embarrassment. "So you're choosing her," I said simply. "Mom, don't be dramatic. I'm not choosing anyone. I'm just trying to be practical. You'll be more comfortable in a hotel anyway. They have room service, cable TV, and you'll be more comfortable without me here." He didn't deny it. That silence said everything I needed to know. Salem stepped closer to Paul, claiming her territory. "We're trying to build something here, Marianne. Paul has worked very hard to get where he is. We can't have complications. Complications. That's what his mother was now. A complication." I picked up my garbage bags. my arms aching from the weight of what little I had left. "I understand," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'll go to the hotel." Paul looked relieved and guilty at the same time, which somehow made it worse. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay? We'll figure out your next steps." But I knew there wouldn't be any next steps that included him. As I walked back to my car, I heard Salem's voice through the door they'd already closed. "Thank God that's over. Can you imagine if my parents had seen her like that?" I sat in my car in their driveway for several minutes, staring at the house where my son lived his life without me, the engagement party I wasn't invited to, the future I wasn't part of, the family that no longer included me. The Holiday Inn cost $129 per night. I had $347 in my checking account and no idea when my next income would come. Insurance would eventually cover rebuilding, but that could take months, maybe years. The hotel clerk, a tired-looking woman about my age, took pity on me and said I could have the room for one night at the weekly rate if I paid cash. The room was clean but impersonal, all beige and brown with artwork that meant nothing to anyone. I set my garbage bags on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my dirty, torn clothes. For the first time since the tornado hit, I allowed myself to cry. I cried for my house, for my belongings, for the photo albums I'd never see again. But mostly, I cried for the realization that I had raised a son who saw his own mother as an embarrassment. Somewhere along the way, I had failed so completely that my child would rather pay for me to disappear than let me sleep on his couch when I had nowhere else to go. That night, lying in a strange bed in clothes that smelled like destruction, I made a decision. I would leave in the morning, but I wouldn't go back to Paul's house. I wouldn't call him for help. I had spent 35 years being his mother, and if that wasn't enough to earn me a place on his couch in my darkest hour, then nothing would be. I would figure this out alone, the way I'd figured out everything else since Harold died, the way I'd apparently been alone long before I realized it. But first, I had to survive tomorrow. And I had no idea how I was going to do that. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the sound of Salem's laughter and saw Paul's face when he chose her over me. By 5 a.m, I gave up trying and sat by the window, watching the sunrise over a world that felt completely foreign to me. The hotel's complimentary breakfast was weak coffee and stale pastries, but it was free, so I forced myself to eat. The other guests were business travelers and tourists, people with lives and destinations and purposes. They talked quietly on their phones about meetings and flight times and dinner reservations. Normal problems. Normal lives. I checked out at 11, knowing I couldn't afford another night but having nowhere else to go. The desk clerk gave me a sympathetic smile and suggested I try the Salvation Army shelter on 5th Street. "They're good people there," she said kindly. "They'll help you get back on your feet." A shelter. At 64 years old, I was going to a homeless shelter. I drove aimlessly for a while, not ready to face that reality yet. The city was busy with Tuesday morning traffic, people rushing to jobs and appointments, their lives continuing as if mine hadn't completely fallen apart. I found myself near the train station downtown, a large brick building from the 1920s that they'd partially converted into shops and restaurants but still used for commuter trains. The parking was free, and there were benches outside where I could sit and think, figure out my next move. The morning was warming up, spring trying to push winter away, and there were people coming and going with purpose and certainty I envied. I sat on a bench near the platform, my 2 garbage bags at my feet like anchors keeping me tethered to a reality I didn't want to accept. Trains came and went, bringing people into the city for work, taking them back to suburbs where they had homes and families who wanted them there. That's when I saw him. He was about 9 or 10 years old, small for his age, with dark hair that needed cutting and clothes that were expensive but wrinkled, as if he'd slept in them. He was sitting on the platform edge, his legs dangling over, much too close to where the trains came in. There were signs everywhere warning people to stay back from the platform edge, but this boy was sitting right on it. Something about his posture worried me. He wasn't fidgeting the way children usually do. He was still, unnaturally still, staring down at the tracks below him. Other people walked past him without seeming to notice, caught up in their own concerns, their own schedules. I found myself standing up, moving closer to the platform. Maybe I was looking for a distraction from my own problems. Or maybe it was just maternal instinct that hadn't died despite what had happened with Paul. The boy needed someone to notice him. As I got closer, I could see his face more clearly. He had large, dark eyes that seemed older than they should, and there was something heartbreakingly lonely about the way he sat there. He was wearing a navy blue polo shirt with a small logo I didn't recognize, and khaki pants that looked like they came from an expensive children's store. I approached slowly, the way you'd approach a wild animal that might bolt. "Honey," I said softly, "you're sitting awfully close to the edge there. Maybe you should move back a little." He didn't respond, didn't even turn to look at me. For a moment, I thought he was ignoring me, but then I noticed he was wearing small hearing aids in both ears. I moved to where he could see me and waved gently to get his attention. When he looked up at me, his eyes were filled with such profound sadness that it took my breath away. I had seen that look before, in my own mirror during the darkest days after Harold's death. It was the look of someone who had given up hope. Without thinking, I found myself signing, "Hello, are you okay?" My hands moved through the familiar motions automatically, muscle memory from years of communicating with my sister Janet before she died. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. He signed back, his small hands moving quickly. "You know sign language?" "Yes," I signed. "My sister was deaf. What's your name?" "Connor," he replied, his hands shaking slightly. "Why are you talking to me? Most people don't notice me." My heart broke a little more. "I notice you. Why are you sitting so close to the tracks, Connor? It's dangerous." His face crumpled, and for a moment, he looked exactly like what he was, a little boy who was hurting. "I wanted to see what it would feel like," he signed. "If a train came, the blood in my veins turned to ice." This child, this beautiful little boy, was contemplating the unthinkable. "Connor, no. Whatever's wrong, there's always another way." "No, there isn't," he signed, tears starting to roll down his cheeks. "My daddy doesn't understand me. Nobody understands me. I'm different, and I make everything harder for everyone." I sat down beside him, not too close, but close enough to reach out if I needed to. "Being different doesn't make you a burden, sweetheart. It makes you special. Tell me about your daddy." "He tries," Connor signed, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "But he doesn't know sign language. He talks to me, but he moves his mouth really slow like I'm stupid, and I have to guess what he's saying. And when I try to tell him things, he gets frustrated because he doesn't understand." The picture was becoming clearer. A hearing father and a deaf son struggling to communicate, both probably feeling isolated and misunderstood. "Where is your daddy now?" "He had to take an important phone call. He told me to wait here." Connor's hands moved more slowly now, exhaustion creeping into his signing. "He's always on the phone. Work is more important than me." I knew that feeling intimately. The loneliness of being overlooked, of feeling like you don't matter to the people who should love you most. This little boy was living his own version of what I'd experienced the night before. "Connor, I want you to listen to me very carefully," I signed, making sure I had his full attention. "You matter. You are important. And the fact that your daddy doesn't know sign language doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It just means he needs help learning how to show it." "You really think so?" he signed, hope flickering in his eyes. "I know so. And right now, I need you to move back from the edge with me. Can you do that?" He nodded and scooted back from the platform edge. As he did, I heard footsteps running toward us, and a man's voice calling out, "Connor! Connor! Where are you?" The man who appeared was tall, probably in his early 40s, wearing an expensive suit and a look of absolute panic. His hair was dark like Connor's, but streaked with silver at the temples, and his eyes were the same deep brown as his son's. When he saw Connor sitting on the platform, relief flooded his face. "There you are. I told you to stay by the information booth, not wander off to the platform." His voice was sharp with fear and frustration. He was speaking, not signing, and I could see Connor straining to read his lips. Connor tried to sign a response, his hands moving quickly to explain, but his father didn't understand. The frustration on both their faces was painful to watch. "Excuse me," I said, standing up and moving between them. "I think there might be some confusion here." The man looked at me for the first time, really looked at me, and I could see him taking in my appearance, the rumpled clothes I'd slept in, the garbage bags at my feet, the general air of someone whose life had recently fallen apart. "I'm sorry," he said more politely. "Were you talking to my son?" "I'm Derek Morrison." "Yes, I was. My name is Marianne. Connor and I were having a conversation about staying safe near the trains." I gestured to Connor, who was watching our exchange intently. He's a very bright boy. "A conversation?" Derek looked confused. "But Connor can't. I mean, he has trouble communicating with strangers." "We were using sign language," I explained. "Connor was telling me about how hard it is when people don't understand him." Derek's face went pale. "You know sign language?" "And he was talking to you?" "Yes, he's quite articulate when he has someone who can understand him." Derek looked at his son, and I saw something break open in his expression. "What was he saying?" I hesitated, looking at Connor, who nodded permission. "He was telling me about feeling lonely, about wishing you could understand each other better." Derek's eyes filled with tears. "Connor," he said, speaking slowly and clearly while facing him so Connor could read his lips. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you felt that way." Connor signed something rapidly, and Derek looked at me helplessly. "He's saying that he knows you love him, but he wishes you could talk together the way we are now. He wants to tell you things, but he doesn't know how to make you understand." Derek knelt down in front of his son, tears flowing freely now. "Connor, I promise you, I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn to talk to you properly. Will you help me?" Connor threw his arms around his father's neck, and they held each other there on the platform while commuters stepped around them. In that moment, watching this father and son find each other again, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the sense that I had made a difference, that my presence had mattered. Derek stood up, keeping one hand on Connor's shoulder, and turned to me. "I don't know how to thank you. I had no idea he was feeling so isolated. We've been struggling since his mother died 2 years ago, and I thought I was doing okay. But clearly, you're doing the best you can," I said gently. "Being a single parent is hard enough without the added challenge of a communication barrier." "Are you a teacher? A therapist?" Derek asked. "You seem to understand him so well." I almost laughed at the irony. "No, I'm just someone who learned sign language for my sister, and someone who understands what it feels like to be misunderstood by the people who should know you best." Derek studied my face, and I could see him really seeing me for the first time. Not just the woman who had helped his son, but the person behind the circumstances. "Are you all right? You seem like you might be going through something difficult yourself." For a moment, I was tempted to brush off his concern the way I always did, to smile and say everything was fine. But sitting there on that platform, after saving his son from a moment of despair that could have ended in tragedy, pretending seemed pointless. "I lost my home in the tornado yesterday," I said simply, "and I found out my family doesn't want me around while I figure out what to do next." Derek's expression changed completely. "You're homeless, and you just spent time helping my son when you have your own crisis to deal with?" "Sometimes helping someone else is the only way to help yourself," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Connor was signing something to his father, frustrated that he couldn't understand the conversation. "He wants to know what we're talking about," I translated. Derek looked at Connor, then back at me. "Could you tell him that the lady who helped him is going through a hard time, and ask him if he thinks we should help her the way she helped us?" I signed Derek's words to Connor, and the boy's face lit up. He signed back enthusiastically. "He says of course we should help you. He says that's what families do, they help each other. And he wants to know if you could be part of our family for a while." Derek looked shocked. "He said that?" "Children often see things more clearly than adults do," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Derek was quiet for a long moment, looking between Connor and me. Finally, he spoke. "I have a large house with several guest rooms, and Connor clearly needs someone who can communicate with him while I learn. Would you consider staying with us temporarily?" Just until you get back on your feet? I stared at him, certain I had misunderstood. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you saw a child in danger and helped him instead of walking away. I know you took time to understand him when you're facing your own crisis. I know my son feels more comfortable with you in 10 minutes than he has with anyone since his mother died. Derek's voice grew stronger, more certain. And I know I need help learning to be the father Connor deserves. Connor was signing rapidly now, and I could see he was excited about something. What's he saying? Derek asked. I watched Connor's hands, feeling tears prick my eyes. He's saying that maybe the tornado brought you something good instead of just taking things away. He's saying maybe it brought him someone who can understand him, and brought you someone who needed a family. Derek wiped his eyes and looked at Connor with such love and amazement that it took my breath away. Out of the mouths of babes, he murmured. Then he looked at me. What do you say, Marianne? Will you help us learn to be a family again? I looked at this father and son, both of them damaged in their own ways, both of them offering me something I thought I'd lost forever, a place where I mattered, a place where I was needed not for what I could provide financially, but for who I was and what I could give from my heart. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'd like that very much. As we walked away from the train platform together, Derek carrying one of my garbage bags, Connor holding my hand, chattering excitedly in sign language about all the things he wanted to show me, I realized that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you really need. Behind us, a train pulled into the station, its whistle echoing off the brick walls. But we were walking towards something else entirely, something that felt like hope. Derek's house was nothing like what I had expected. When he mentioned a large house with guest rooms, I'd pictured something modest, maybe a 4-bedroom colonial like the ones in Paul's neighborhood. What I saw as we pulled through the iron gates was a mansion that belonged in a magazine. The driveway curved through manicured grounds that must have cost more to maintain each month than I'd made in a year at the grocery store. The house itself was Georgian style, all red brick and white columns, with wings that seemed to stretch forever in both directions. Connor pressed his face to the window, signing excitedly about showing me his room and the library and the pool. This is beautiful, I said, trying not to sound as overwhelmed as I felt. Derek glanced at me in the rearview mirror. It's too big for just the two of us. Connor gets lost in it sometimes. I think that's part of why he feels so isolated. As we pulled up to the front door, I noticed the landscaping was perfect, but somehow cold, like a hotel rather than a home. There were no toys scattered on the lawn, no chalk drawings on the sidewalk, none of the cheerful chaos that usually surrounds a house where a child lives. Derek must have seen me looking. Connor's nanny quit 3 months ago. She said communicating with him was too difficult. Since then, it's just been the two of us and the housekeeper, Maria. She comes in during the day, but she doesn't know sign language either. The front hall was larger than my entire living room had been, with a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. Our footsteps echoed on the marble floor as Connor ran ahead, signing for me to follow him. He wants to show you something, I translated for Derek, who was watching his son with a mixture of love and sadness. I wish I knew what he was thinking half the time, Derek said quietly. I talk to him, but I never know if he really understands. And when he tries to tell me things, he shrugged helplessly. I smile and nod and hope I'm responding appropriately. But I know I'm missing so much. We followed Connor up a sweeping staircase to the second floor. His bedroom was at the end of a long hallway, and when he threw open the door, I understood why he'd been so excited to show me. The walls were covered with drawings, not the random scribbles you'd expect from a 10-year-old, but detailed, careful artwork that told stories. There were pictures of him and a woman with kind eyes who must have been his mother. Pictures of him and Derek. But in many of them, Derek was facing away or looking at a phone. And scattered throughout were drawings of hands. Hands signing, hands reaching toward each other, hands that never quite touched. Connor, these are incredible, I signed, moving closer to examine the artwork. You're very talented. He beamed, then pointed to a drawing near his bed. It showed a train station, But in this version, there were people on the platform who were signing to each other. Happy people, connected people. Is this what you were thinking about at the train station today? I asked gently. Connor nodded, then signed. I was thinking about what it would be like if everyone could understand each other, if I wasn't always alone with my thoughts. I translated for Derek, who had been watching our conversation with growing emotion. God, Marianne, I had no idea. I thought he was adjusting well. He never seemed. Derek ran his hands through his hair. How did I miss this? What kind of father am I? Connor had been watching his father's face, reading the distress there even without understanding the words. He moved to Derek and tugged on his sleeve, then signed something urgent. He wants to know why you look sad, I translated. He's saying he doesn't want you to be upset because of him. Derek knelt down to Connor's level, taking his son's hands in his own. Connor, I'm not upset with you. I'm upset with myself for not learning how to talk to you properly, but that's going to change, okay? Starting tomorrow, I'm going to find someone to teach me sign language. Actually, I said, surprising myself, I could teach you, if you'd like. Derek looked up at me with hope and gratitude. You would do that? It would give me something useful to do while I figure out my next steps. And Connor could help. Children are often the best teachers. Connor clapped his hands together and signed something rapidly. He says that would make him the happiest boy in the world, I translated, feeling my own heart lift at his enthusiasm. Derek stood up, and for a moment, we all just stood there in Connor's room surrounded by his artwork, feeling like maybe we'd stumbled onto something important. Let me show you to your room, Derek said. Then maybe we can talk about how this arrangement might work. The guest room was larger than any bedroom I'd ever had, with its own bathroom and a sitting area by the windows that overlooked the gardens. Derek set my garbage bags on the bed, and I felt suddenly self-conscious about how little I had, how out of place I looked in this elegant space. Marianne, Derek said gently, I want you to know that this isn't charity. If you're going to help me learn to communicate with my son, that's work. Real, valuable work. I'd like to pay you for it. I shook my head immediately. Oh no, Derek, I couldn't. You're giving me a place to stay. And you're giving me my relationship with my son back. Do you have any idea how valuable that is? His voice was intense, passionate. I've been failing him for 2 years, watching him withdraw more and more, feeling helpless. In one afternoon, you've shown me more about who he really is than I've learned in months. But I don't have any credentials, any formal training. You have something better. You have the ability to see him, really see him. And you understand what it's like to feel invisible to your own family. The last part hit me like a physical blow, not because it was cruel, but because it was so perfectly accurate. Derek must have seen something in my face because his expression softened. I'm sorry. That was too personal. I just meant, no, you're right. I do understand that feeling. I sat down in the chair by the window, suddenly exhausted. My son couldn't get rid of me fast enough yesterday. His fiancée made it clear that I was an embarrassment, and he agreed with her. Their loss, Derek said firmly. Seriously, Marianne. In one day, you've shown more compassion and insight than most people show in a lifetime. If your son can't see your value, that says everything about him and nothing about you. I looked out the window at the gardens, trying to process this strange turn my life had taken. 24 hours ago, I'd been a woman with a home, a routine, a place in the world, even if it was a small one. Now I was sitting in a mansion, being offered a job by a man I'd just met, planning to teach his son and him how to communicate with each other. Can I ask you something? I said, turning back to Derek. Of course. What do you do? For work, I mean. This house, this lifestyle. I gestured around the room. Derek smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm in technology, software development, specifically programs for businesses. I started my company about 15 years ago, and we've been fortunate enough to be very successful. Fortunate, I repeated. Somehow, I doubt luck had much to do with it. No, you're right. It's been a lot of work. Too much work, probably. Especially since Eleanor died. His voice grew quiet. I threw myself into the business because it was easier than dealing with grief. I told myself I was providing for Connor's future, but really, I was just avoiding the present. What happened to Eleanor? Cancer. It was fast, aggressive. From diagnosis, too. To the end was only 4 months. Derek sat down in the chair across from me, looking suddenly older. Connor was 8 when she died. He'd already lost some of his hearing from a childhood illness, but Eleanor was the one who learned sign language with him, who made sure he felt connected and understood. When she died, I didn't know how to fill that role. So you both lost her in different ways. Exactly. And instead of grieving together, we both retreated into ourselves. I worked longer hours, took more business trips. Connor spent more time alone, drawing, creating these incredible pictures that I was too busy to really look at. Derek's voice was heavy with regret. I hired nannies and tutors and therapists, thinking I could pay someone else to give him what I couldn't. But what he really needed was his father. You're here now, I pointed out. That's what matters. Am I, though? Today at the train station, I almost lost him because I was on a conference call about a merger that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. I told him to wait by the information booth while I took the call, and when I finished, he was gone. Do you know how terrifying those 15 minutes were? I thought about Connor sitting on the edge of the platform, contemplating the unthinkable. I think I can imagine. And then I found you two talking, really talking, and I realized I haven't had a real conversation with my son in 2 years. Not since Eleanor died. Derek looked at me with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. So when I say this isn't charity, I mean it. You're offering to give me back my relationship with my son. That's priceless. A knock on the door interrupted us. Connor peeked in, then entered when Derek waved him in. He went straight to me and started signing. He wants to know if you're going to stay for dinner. He says Maria is making spaghetti, and he wants to tell you about his school. Derek's face lit up. He wants to tell you about school? He never talks about school. I ask him every day how it was, and he just shrugs. Maybe he wants to tell you too, but he doesn't know how to make you understand, I suggested gently. Connor was still signing, his hands moving with increasing excitement. Now he's asking if we can all eat together, and if I'll teach both of you some sign language tonight. He says he has so many things he wants to say that he's never been able to tell you. Derek's eyes filled with tears. Tell him yes. Tell him I've been waiting to hear those things for a very long time. As I translated, Connor threw his arms around his father, and Derek held him tightly. Over Connor's head, Derek mouthed, "Thank you," to me, and I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't felt in years, the sense that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Later, over dinner, Connor taught Derek his first sign language lesson. We started with simple words, hello, thank you, love, and Derek practiced with the concentration of someone learning a foreign language, which, in many ways, he was. Connor was patient but enthusiastic, correcting Derek's hand positions and repeating signs until his father got them right. For the first time since I'd met them, I could see the family resemblance, not just in their physical features but in their determination, their intensity, their capacity for love. "This is harder than it looks," Derek said, struggling with the sign for understand. Connor giggled, and signed something to me. He says you're doing good for a beginner, but your fingers are too stiff. He wants you to relax your hands. Derek laughed. My son is critiquing my signing technique. I never thought I'd be so happy to be corrected by a 10-year-old. As the evening went on, I watched Derek and Connor begin to find each other again. It wasn't magic. There was still frustration on both sides, still moments of confusion and miscommunication. But there was also laughter and connection, and the kind of patient effort that real love requires. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt useful. Not just as someone who could provide money or solve problems or clean up messes, but as someone whose presence made a real difference in the lives of people who mattered. That night, lying in the comfortable guest bed, I thought about Paul and Salem preparing for their engagement party. They were probably relieved that they didn't have to deal with me, that I wasn't there to embarrass them or complicate their perfect event. They had no idea that their rejection had led me to something infinitely more valuable than anything they could have offered. I had found a place where I was needed for who I was, not what I could provide. And tomorrow, I would wake up with purpose again, with work that mattered, with people who saw value in what I had to offer. Sometimes, I realized, being thrown away is the first step toward finding where you actually belong. 3 weeks into my new life with Derek and Connor, I had almost forgotten what it felt like to check my phone with dread. Almost. The morning started like all the others had since I'd moved into the Morrison house. Connor woke me up by knocking on my bedroom door, a habit Derek was trying to break, but that I secretly enjoyed. He would stand in the hallway, still in his pajamas, and sign, "Good morning, Grandma Marianne," through the crack in the door. Grandma Marianne. He'd started calling me that the second week. And when I asked him why, he signed, "Because you take care of us like grandmas do in movies, and you understand me like family should." Derek had gotten choked up when I translated it, and I'd had to excuse myself to cry in the bathroom. This particular morning was a Saturday, which meant Derek didn't have to leave for the office, and we could spend more time on his sign language lessons. He was improving rapidly, driven by a determination I'd rarely seen in anyone. Every evening after Connor went to bed, he practiced vocabulary cards I'd made for him, and every morning he greeted his son with new signs he'd learned. "Watch this," Derek said to me as Connor came down to breakfast. He signed, "Good morning, Connor. Did you sleep well?" Connor's face lit up with pure joy. His father's signing was still slow and slightly clumsy, but it was clear and understandable. Connor responded enthusiastically, and for once, Derek understood every word without needing me to translate. He said he had good dreams about the three of us going to the zoo next weekend, Derek said proudly, then looked at me for confirmation. Perfect translation, I confirmed, feeling a swell of pride in both of them. These small victories had become the highlights of my days. Watching Derek and Connor rebuild their relationship, seeing Connor become more animated and confident as his father learned to communicate with him, feeling useful in a way I'd never experienced before. It was healing something in me I hadn't even realized was broken. Derek had insisted on paying me $500 a week for Connor's tutoring and his sign language lessons, plus room and board. It was more money than I'd ever made, and when I protested that it was too much, he'd simply said, "You can't put a price on getting your family back." I was helping Connor with his homework at the kitchen table when my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. Paul. I stared at the phone for several rings, unsure whether to answer. Derek, who was reading nearby, noticed my expression. "Everything okay?" "It's my son," I said, my voice tight. Derek looked at Connor, who was absorbed in his math problems, then back at me. "Do you want to take it? We can give you some privacy." I shook my head and let the call go to voicemail. But even as I tried to focus on Connor's homework, I could feel anxiety creeping up my spine like ice water. 5 minutes later, Paul called again, then again. By the fourth call, Derek was frowning. "Marianne, maybe you should answer it. He seems persistent." With trembling fingers, I accepted the call. "Hello, Paul." "Mom, finally. I've been trying to reach you for hours." Hours. He'd called 4 times in 20 minutes, but that was hours to him. "What do you want, Paul?" "Want?" "Mom, I'm worried about you. We're worried about you. Salem and I have been talking and we realized we may have been too hasty the other night. You were in shock from the tornado, and we were stressed about the engagement party. We should have been more understanding." I closed my eyes, feeling Derek's concerned gaze on me. This was not the Paul I remembered from 3 weeks ago. This Paul sounded different, careful, like someone reading from a script. "I'm fine, Paul. I found a place to stay." "Well, that's actually why I'm calling. Salem's parents had to cancel their visit. Her father's company is going through some kind of merger or something. Anyway, the party's postponed, so there's no reason you can't come stay with us now. Salem feels terrible about how things were left." Salem feels terrible. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about the situation. That's very generous, but like I said, I'm settled where I am. "Mom, be reasonable. You can't just be staying anywhere. I know the insurance situation is complicated, and you don't have a lot of resources. Salem and I talked about it, and we want to help. Family should stick together. Family should stick together. Where had this sentiment been 3 weeks ago when I was standing on his doorstep with everything I owned in garbage bags? Paul, I appreciate the offer, but I'm fine where I am. Where exactly is that, Mom? You're being very mysterious. Are you staying at one of those extended stay motels? Those places aren't safe for a woman your age. Connor looked up from his homework, sensing the tension in my voice. I gave him what I hoped was a reassuring smile and stepped into the adjacent living room for more privacy. I'm staying with a family. I'm helping them, and they're helping me. A family? What family? Mom, you don't just move in with strangers. That's not safe. What do you even know about these people? The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. My own son was lecturing me about the dangers of trusting strangers, when strangers had shown me more kindness in 3 weeks than he had in years. They're good people, Paul. Better than... I stopped myself. Better than what? Better than your own family? His voice was getting sharper now, more like the Paul I remembered. Mom, this is crazy. You're 64 years old. You can't just run away from your family and play house with strangers. I'm not playing house. I'm working. I have a job. A job? Doing what? And don't tell me you're cleaning houses or something. You're too old for that kind of physical work. I felt my temper flare. I'm teaching sign language, if you must know. And I'm not too old for anything I choose to do. There was a pause. Sign language? Who the hell needs to learn sign language? A father who wants to communicate with his deaf son. The words came out sharper than I intended. Another pause. Longer this time. Mom, this sounds unusual. Are you sure these people are legitimate? I mean, who just takes in a random woman to teach sign language? Someone who values what I have to offer, I said quietly. Look, I think you need to come home. Salem and I can drive up and get you this afternoon. We'll sort out the insurance stuff together. Figure out a plan for rebuilding. You don't need to be dependent on strangers. I'm not dependent on them, Paul. I'm contributing. I'm valued. I stopped, realizing I was saying too much. You're valued? Paul's voice was odd now, calculating. Mom, what exactly is this arrangement? Are these people paying you? I should have lied. Should have dodged the question. But I was tired of pretending, tired of hiding. Yes, Paul, they pay me. Because my work has value. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. How much? Paul finally asked. That's not your concern. How much, Mom? Something in his tone made my skin crawl. This wasn't concern for my welfare. This was something else entirely. Paul, I need to go. Connor needs help with his homework. Connor? The kid's name is Connor? Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I want you to give me the address of where you're staying. Salem and I are coming to get you. No. What do you mean, no? I mean no, Paul. I'm not giving you the address and I'm not leaving. I'm happy here. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. The trauma of the tornado, being homeless, it's affected your judgment. You can't just move in with strangers and... I hung up. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down. Through the doorway, I could see Derek watching me with concern while Connor continued working on his math, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Derek stood up and walked over to me. That didn't sound like a pleasant conversation. My son wants me to come live with him. Now. 3 weeks after he wouldn't let me sleep on his couch. What changed? Derek asked, though his tone suggested he suspected the answer. I mentioned that you pay me for my work. Derek's face darkened. Ah, so now that there's money involved, suddenly you're family again. I should have expected this. Paul's always been motivated by financial considerations, but I shook my head. I thought maybe the tornado, almost losing me, might have made him realize that money isn't everything. But it didn't. No. If anything, it seems to have made him more interested in controlling my finances. First, Connor appeared in the doorway, signing, Are you okay, Grandma Marianne? You look upset. I forced a smile and signed back. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a difficult phone call. With your son? Connor asked. Derek had told him some of my story, Age appropriately edited. I nodded. Connor thought for a moment, then signed. Maybe he doesn't understand you either, like my daddy used to not understand me. Maybe he needs to learn better listening. Out of the mouths of babes. I glanced at Derek, who had caught enough of Connor's signing to understand the gist of his comment. Connor might be onto something, Derek said gently, but some people don't want to learn better listening. Some people only hear what benefits them. My phone buzzed with a text from Paul. Mom, I'm driving up there tomorrow. I need the address. I showed the text to Derek, whose jaw tightened. Are you worried? He asked. I thought about it. Was I worried? 3 weeks ago, I would have been terrified of Paul's disapproval, desperate to fix whatever I'd done wrong. But now, no, I said, surprising myself. I'm not worried. I'm angry. Derek raised an eyebrow. I'm angry that he thinks he can ignore me when I need help, then swoop in and take control when he thinks there's something in it for him. I'm angry that he assumes I'm too incompetent to make my own decisions. And I'm angry that he's trying to disrupt the first happiness I've found in years, because it doesn't serve his purposes. So, what do you want to do? I looked at Connor, who was watching our conversation with intelligent eyes, picking up on the emotional undercurrents even when he couldn't follow all the words. This little boy who had trusted me completely from the moment we met. Derek, who had taken me in when I was a stranger and treated me like family from day one. I want to protect what we've built here, I said. Paul can disapprove all he wants, but he doesn't get to destroy this. Derek nodded. Then we'll protect it. Together. The next morning, Paul's car pulled into the driveway at exactly 10 o'clock. I watched from the window as he and Salem got out, both of them looking around at the mansion with expressions I recognized. Assessment, calculation, greed. Salem was wearing a designer outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her hair and makeup perfect despite the 2-hour drive. Paul was in his weekend casual clothes, khakis and a polo shirt that still managed to look expensive. They both wore the expressions of people who were used to being the most important people in any room they entered. Derek appeared beside me at the window, Connor on his other side. Those are your son and his fiancée? Derek asked. That's them. They look like they're evaluating the property for purchase, he observed dryly. Connor was watching them too, and he signed something that made Derek smile grimly. What did he say? I asked. He said they look like the mean people in movies who try to take things away from the good people. Sometimes children really do see most clearly. The doorbell rang, and my stomach clenched. Derek put a hand on my shoulder. Remember, this is your home now. You don't owe them anything. I nodded and went to answer the door, Derek and Connor flanking me like bodyguards. When I opened the door, Paul's practiced smile faltered slightly as he took in the sight of me standing between Derek and Connor, clearly at home, and clearly not alone. Mom, he said, his voice artificially warm. You look good, rested. Hello, Paul, Salem. Salem's eyes were busy cataloging everything she could see of the house's interior, practically calculating square footage and property values. Aren't you going to invite us in? Paul asked, his smile becoming more strained. I glanced at Derek, who nodded slightly. Of course. This is Derek Morrison and his son Connor. Derek, Connor, this is my son Paul and his fiancée Salem. Derek stepped forward, extending his hand to Paul with perfect politeness. Nice to meet you. Your mother has told us so much about you. Paul shook Derek's hand, but his eyes were sharp, evaluative. I wish I could say the same. Mom's been very secretive about her. Arrangement here. There's nothing secretive about it, Derek said mildly. Your mother is teaching Connor and me sign language. She's an excellent teacher. Salem finally spoke, her voice syrupy sweet. That's so nice. Marianne always was good with children. But surely this was meant to be temporary. Just until she gets back on her feet after the tornado? That's up to your mother, Derek said, looking at me. She's welcome here as long as she wants to stay. Paul's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, that's very generous, but family takes care of family. Mom belongs with us. Connor, who had been watching this exchange with growing tension, suddenly stepped forward and signed something rapidly. Paul looked confused and slightly annoyed. What's he doing? He's communicating, I said coolly. In sign language, the language you just dismissed as unimportant. What did he say? Salem asked, her curiosity overriding her attempt at politeness. I looked at Connor, who nodded permission to translate. He said that family is supposed to make you feel safe and loved, not scared and unwanted. He wants to know why you made me feel scared and unwanted when I needed help. The silence that followed was deafening. Paul's face flushed red, and Salem looked genuinely shocked that a child would be so direct. Now see here, Paul started, but Derek held up a hand. I think Connor makes an excellent point. Your mother was in crisis, and you turned her away. Now that you've learned she's in a stable, paid position, you're suddenly concerned about her welfare. I'm sure you can understand why that might seem suspect. And there it was, out in the open. The real reason for Paul's sudden interest, named and acknowledged. Paul's face went through several expressions before settling on indignant anger. How dare you question my motives regarding my own mother? You don't know our family. You don't know our situation. I know your mother, Derek said firmly. I know she's kind, intelligent, capable, and generous. I know she saved my son's life and has been rebuilding our family ever since. And I know she deserves better than to be treated like a burden when she needs help and an asset when she doesn't. Paul looked like he wanted to argue further, but Salem put a hand on his arm. She'd been scanning the room while Derek and Paul sparred, and I could practically see her recalculating the situation. Paul, she said quietly, maybe we should respect Marianne's choice, if she's happy here. But Paul wasn't ready to give up. Mom, think about this logically. You don't really know these people. What happens when they don't need a sign language teacher anymore? What happens when the novelty wears off? You'll have nowhere to go. Then I'll figure something out, I said calmly. The same way I've been figuring things out my whole life. But you don't have to. You have family. You have us. Connor signed something to me, and despite the tension in the room, I had to smile. What did he say now? Paul demanded, clearly frustrated by being excluded from these side conversations. He said that real family doesn't wait until you're useful to want you around? This time the silence was broken by Derek's barely suppressed chuckle. Even Salem looked like she was fighting a smile. Paul's face had gone from red to nearly purple. This is ridiculous. Mom, get your things. We're leaving. No, I said simply. What? No, Paul. I'm not leaving. You can't seriously choose these strangers over your own family. I looked at him. This man I had raised. This person I had sacrificed for and worried about and loved unconditionally for 35 years. And felt something finally break free inside me. You're right, I said. I am choosing them over you. Because they treat me like family, and you treat me like an inconvenience. Paul stared at me in shock. Salem was looking between us like she was watching a tennis match. I think, Derek said quietly, it's time for you to leave. Paul's mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. This isn't over. You're making a huge mistake, Mom. When this falls apart, don't expect to come crawling back to us. I won't, I said, and meant it completely. As Paul and Salem walked back to their car, Salem looked back at the house one more time, and I saw something in her expression that looked almost like respect. Paul, on the other hand, slammed his car door hard enough to rattle the windows. We watched them drive away in silence. Finally, Connor tugged on my sleeve and signed, Are you sad that they left? I considered the question seriously. Was I sad? I felt many things, relieved, proud, free, even a little scared. But sad wasn't one of them. No, sweetheart, I signed back. I'm not sad at all. Derek put his arm around my shoulders in a gesture that was purely familial. Come on, he said. Let's go home. And we did. We went home. I should have known Paul wouldn't give up that easily. The first sign of trouble came 3 days after his visit, when Derek's business attorney called him at home instead of the office. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard Derek's voice from his study, tense and formal in a way I'd never heard before. Connor was at the table working on a science project, building a model volcano that we'd been planning to erupt later that afternoon. He looked up when Derek's voice carried from the other room, signing, Daddy sounds upset. Is someone in trouble? I don't know, sweetheart, I signed back, but my stomach was already churning with a familiar dread. 20 minutes later, Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face grim. Marianne, could I speak with you privately? Connor looked between us with the sharp intuition of a child who'd learned to read emotional undercurrents. Should I go to my room? He signed. Just for a few minutes, Derek signed back, his hands moving more smoothly now after weeks of practice. We'll finish your volcano when we're done talking. Once Connor had gone upstairs, Derek sat down heavily at the kitchen table. That was my lawyer. Your son has filed a complaint with Adult Protective Services. The words hit me like a physical blow. What kind of complaint? He's claiming that I'm taking advantage of an elderly, vulnerable woman, that you're not mentally competent to make decisions about your living situation or finances. He's asking for a welfare check and an investigation into our arrangement. I felt the blood drain from my face. Can he do that? Apparently he can. The caseworker will be here tomorrow afternoon. They have to investigate any complaint involving potential elder abuse or exploitation, even if it seems frivolous. Elder abuse, exploitation. The words felt surreal applied to my situation. 3 weeks ago, I had been desperate and homeless. Now I was being accused of being victimized by the people who had saved me. What does this mean? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Derek ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of stress. It means they'll interview both of us separately. They'll want to see your living arrangements, understand the financial arrangement, assess your mental capacity to make decisions. If they find evidence of exploitation, they could make me leave. Or worse, they could determine that you need a conservator to make decisions for you. Paul could petition to be appointed as your legal guardian. The room seemed to spin around me. Paul, who had turned me away in my hour of need, could become legally responsible for controlling my life? The same person who saw me only as an inconvenience or a source of income could be given the power to decide where I lived, how I spent my money, who I spent time with. Derek, I'm sorry. I never meant for you and Connor to be dragged into this. Hey. His voice was firm, and he reached across the table to cover my hand with his. You have nothing to apologize for. Paul is the one who should be ashamed of himself. But what if they believe him? What if they think I'm not capable of making my own decisions? Derek's grip on my hand tightened. Then we'll fight it. I have excellent lawyers, and Connor and I will testify about how much you've contributed to our lives. But Marianne, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. My heart started racing. What? Are you staying here because you want to, or because you feel like you have nowhere else to go? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, if money weren't an issue, if you had unlimited resources and options, would you choose to be here with Connor and me? I stared at him, realizing that no one had ever asked me that question before, not about any major decision in my life. Harold had simply assumed I wanted to marry him when he proposed. Paul had never asked if I wanted to move closer when I retired. Even well-meaning friends and relatives always assumed they knew what was best for me. Yes, I said without hesitation. Yes, Derek. I would choose to be here. These 3 weeks have been the happiest I've been in years, maybe decades. Connor feels like the grandson I never thought I'd have. And you. I paused, searching for the right words. You and Connor have made me feel valued in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Derek smiled for the first time since he'd gotten the phone call. Good. Then we go into this with the truth. And the truth is that you're a competent adult who chose to enter into a mutually beneficial arrangement with people who care about you. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. What if the caseworker believed Paul's story? What if they decided I was being manipulated or coerced? What if I lost not just this new life I'd built, but my freedom to make my own choices? I must have been tossing and turning more than I realized, because around midnight, there was a soft knock on my door. When I opened it, Connor stood in the hallway in his pajamas, signing, "Can't sleep either?" "How did you know I couldn't sleep?" I signed back. "Your room is under mine. I could hear you moving around." He paused, then added, "I'm scared about tomorrow too." My heart broke a little. "Oh, sweetheart, you don't need to be scared. This is grown-up stuff that has nothing to do with you. Connor shook his head emphatically. It has everything to do with me. If they make you leave, I won't have anyone to talk to again. Daddy's getting better at signing, but you're the one who really understands me. I knelt down to his level, taking his hands in mine. Connor, listen to me very carefully. No matter what happens tomorrow, you will never be alone again. Your daddy loves you, and he's learning to communicate with you better every day. And even if something happened and I couldn't live here anymore, I would still be part of your life. I would still be your Grandma Mary Ann. Promise, he signed, tears starting to form in his eyes. I promise. Some bonds can't be broken, no matter what papers people sign or what decisions other people make. Connor hugged me tightly, and I held him until his breathing evened out and he felt ready to go back to bed. But as I tucked him in and kissed his forehead, I made a silent vow. I would not let Paul's manipulation destroy this little boy's sense of security. Whatever it cost me, I would protect Connor and Derek from the fallout of my son's greed. The caseworker arrived the next afternoon precisely at 2 o'clock. Janet Morrison, no relation to Derek, she was quick to clarify, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that revealed nothing of her thoughts. She wore a conservative pantsuit and carried a tablet and a thick folder. Mrs. Holloway, she said as Derek led her into the living room. I'm here to follow up on a complaint filed by your son regarding your current living situation. I want you to know that these investigations are routine, and my only concern is your well-being and safety. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. I understand. What would you like to know? Let's start with how you came to live here. Can you tell me about the circumstances that led to this arrangement? I told her about the tornado, about going to Paul's house, about the rejection and the night at the train station. I told her about meeting Connor and Derek, about the immediate connection I'd felt with Connor and the communication barrier they'd been struggling with. I was careful to be factual, not emotional, but I couldn't keep all the pain out of my voice when I described that first night. Ms. Morrison took notes on her tablet, her expression neutral. And when Mr. Morrison offered you housing, what were the terms discussed? Initially, it was just a place to stay while I figured out my next steps. But when we realized how much Connor and Derek needed help with communication, it evolved into a more formal arrangement. Tell me about the financial aspect. Your son has expressed concern that you're being exploited financially. Derek started to speak, but Ms. Morrison held up a hand. I'll want to interview you separately, Mr. Morrison. Right now, I need to hear from Mrs. Holloway. I took a deep breath. Derek pays me $500 per week for tutoring Connor and teaching both of them sign language, plus room and board. It's more than fair compensation for the work I do. And you feel this arrangement is equitable? You don't feel pressured or coerced in any way? Absolutely not. If anything, Derek has been too generous. I offered to work for just room and board, but he insisted that my work has value and should be compensated accordingly. Ms. Morrison made more notes. Mrs. Holloway, your son has suggested that the trauma of losing your home may have affected your judgment. How would you respond to that? I felt a flash of anger, but I kept my voice calm. I would say that my judgment has never been clearer. For the first time in years, I'm in a situation where I'm valued for what I contribute, not just tolerated out of obligation. The trauma didn't cloud my judgment. It clarified it. Can you tell me about your relationship with Connor? Your son has expressed concern about an elderly woman being responsible for a young child. This time, I couldn't keep the emotion out of my voice. Connor is a remarkable little boy who was struggling to communicate with his father. I've been able to help bridge that gap, and in return, Connor has brought joy and purpose into my life that I didn't even know I was missing. I'm not responsible for him in the way a parent would be. Derek is an excellent father. I'm more like a translator and a friend. And if this arrangement were to end, how would you feel about that? I met her eyes directly. It would break my heart, but not because I'd lose the financial security, because I'd lose my family. After interviewing me, Ms. Morrison spent an hour with Derek, then another 30 minutes with Connor. I waited in the kitchen, pacing and trying to distract myself by preparing dinner, but my hands were shaking too much to be useful. Finally, Ms. Morrison returned to the living room where Derek and I waited. Connor sat beside me, having insisted on being present for whatever decision was made. "I've completed my initial assessment, Ms. Morrison said, consulting her tablet. "Mrs. Holloway, I found no evidence of exploitation, coercion, or diminished capacity. You appear to be a competent adult who has made an informed decision about your living situation." The relief was so intense I felt dizzy. Derek reached over and squeezed my hand. "However, Ms. Morrison continued, your son has indicated that he plans to file additional complaints and possibly pursue legal guardianship proceedings. I want to make sure you understand your rights." "What rights?" I asked. "You have the right to choose where you live, who you live with, and how you spend your money, as long as you're mentally competent to make those decisions. No one can force you to live somewhere you don't want to live, or prevent you from living somewhere you do want to live, without substantial legal justification." She handed me a card. "If you need legal assistance protecting those rights, here's the contact information for our legal aid office. They specialize in elder rights issues." After Ms. Morrison left, the three of us sat in the living room in exhausted silence. Connor was the first to speak, signing, "Does this mean Grandma Marianne gets to stay?" "For now," Derek signed back, "but we might have more battles ahead." Connor considered this seriously, then signed, "Then we'll fight them together. That's what families do." That evening, as Derek and I sat on the back patio after Connor had gone to bed, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "What do you want to do, Marianne?" "Paul isn't going to stop. He'll keep filing complaints, keep trying to force you to come home with him. I can fight this legally, but it's going to be expensive and stressful, and it'll put Connor in the middle of it." I stared out at the gardens, lit softly by the landscape lighting. 3 weeks ago, I would have given in, would have decided that causing trouble wasn't worth it, that I should just go back to Paul and make the best of it. But 3 weeks ago, I didn't have Connor calling me Grandma Marianne. I didn't have Derek treating me like family. I didn't have work that mattered or a place where I belonged. "I want to fight," I said quietly. "Not because I'm stubborn, and not because I want to hurt Paul, though God knows he's hurt me enough. I want to fight because what we have here is worth protecting. Connor needs consistency and love and people who understand him. You need support as a single parent, and I need to matter." Derek nodded slowly. "Then we fight. Together." The next morning brought another challenge, one I hadn't anticipated. Derek was in his study on a conference call when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a well-dressed woman in her 40s standing on the porch with an official-looking folder in her hands. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm Rebecca Chen, an attorney representing your son Paul Holloway. I have some documents for you." My blood turned to ice as I accepted the folder. Inside was a petition for guardianship, filed in the county court, requesting that Paul be appointed as my legal guardian due to diminished capacity resulting from trauma and exploitation by unknown parties. "Mrs. Holloway," Rebecca Chen said gently, "your son is concerned about your well-being. These proceedings are designed to protect you." I looked up from the papers, feeling something crystallize inside me. "Ms. Chen, I want you to give my son a message. Of course. Tell him that if he wants a war, he's got one." The attorney's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mrs. Holloway, I don't think you understand the serious nature of these proceedings." "Oh, I understand perfectly. My son couldn't control me when I was homeless and desperate, so now he's trying to have me declared incompetent so he can control me legally. But I'm not the broken, defeated woman who stood on his doorstep 3 weeks ago, and I'm not going down without a fight." As I closed the door on Rebecca Chen's shocked face, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The thrill of choosing to fight for something I believed in, instead of just enduring whatever life handed me. Paul wanted a battle? He was about to learn that some wars aren't worth starting. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of what had truly become my home, preparing Connor's birthday cake. 11 years old today, and he'd requested chocolate with vanilla frosting and enough candles to light up the whole room. Derek was at the store picking up last-minute party supplies, and Connor was upstairs wrapping a present he'd made for me. Apparently, the birthday boy giving gifts to others was a tradition he'd invented himself. The legal battle with Paul had been brutal but brief. Derek's attorney, Margaret Williams, was a formidable woman who specialized in elder rights cases, and she'd made short work of Paul's guardianship petition. The Adult Protective Services investigation had already cleared me of being an exploitation victim. When Paul's own attorney realized that her client was trying to gain control over a competent woman who was living independently and earning her own income, she'd quietly suggested he drop the case. Paul hadn't spoken to me since the court hearing 8 months ago, where the judge had not only denied his petition, but had also ordered him to pay my legal fees. Salem had sent a brief email afterward, claiming she'd never supported Paul's actions and that she hoped I was happy. I'd deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. But the real victory wasn't legal. It was the life we'd built together. Connor was thriving in ways that went far beyond our communication breakthrough. Derek had become fluent in sign language, and their father-son relationship had blossomed into something beautiful to witness. The little boy who'd once felt so isolated that he'd contemplated the unthinkable was now confident, curious, and joyful. I heard footsteps on the stairs and turned to see Connor bounding into the kitchen, his arms full of wrapped packages. "These are for you, Grandma Marianne," he signed, his face glowing with excitement. "For helping make this the best year of my life." "Sweetheart, it's your birthday. I should be giving you gifts." "But you already gave me the best gift," he signed back. "You gave me my daddy back, and you gave me a grandma who really understands me." I felt tears prick my eyes as I knelt down to hug him. This beautiful, sensitive boy had healed something in me I hadn't even known was broken. Loving him and being loved by him had taught me the difference between being needed and being wanted, between obligation and choice. Derek arrived home as I was putting the finishing touches on the cake, his arms loaded with bags from the party store. "The guest of honor is getting impatient," he announced, grinning at Connor. "He's been asking me every 5 minutes if it's party time yet." "Almost ready," I said, stepping back to admire my handiwork. The cake was decorated with a train, a nod to where Connor and I had first met, and surrounded by 11 bright yellow candles. Derek set down the bags and walked over to me, his expression suddenly serious. "Marianne, before everyone gets here, there's something Connor and I wanted to talk to you about." My heart skipped. Had I done something wrong? Was this arrangement not working as well as I'd thought? Connor bounced over to us, signing rapidly. "Tell her, Daddy. Tell her about the surprise." Derek's serious expression melted into a smile. "Connor, you're supposed to let me do the talking first." "What surprise?" I asked, looking between them. Derek reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Connor and I have been talking about how much we love having you as part of our family, and we were wondering—" He paused, seeming nervous. "We were wondering if you'd like to make it official." I stared at the envelope, confused. "I don't understand." Connor couldn't contain himself any longer. He started signing so fast his hands were almost a blur. "We want to adopt you. Like how some kids get adopted by new families, but the other way around. Daddy says there's a thing called adult adoption, where you can choose your family even when you're grown up." I looked at Derek, sure I'd misunderstood. "Adult adoption?" Derek nodded, his cheeks slightly flushed. "It's a legal process where adults can be formally adopted into a family. We've been talking about it for months, Connor and I. You're already our family in every way that matters, but we hoped you might want it to be official." The envelope in Derek's hands contained adoption papers. They wanted to adopt me. After a lifetime of feeling like an outsider in my own biological family, these two people wanted to choose me as their family legally and permanently. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. Connor stepped closer and took my hands in his. "Say yes, Grandma Marianne. Please say yes. I want everyone to know that you're my real grandma, not just someone who lives with us." I looked into his earnest face, then at Derek, who was watching me with hopeful anxiety. "You want me to be your family? Legally? Forever?" "We want you to be our family the way you already are in our hearts," Derek said softly. "Connor will officially be your grandson, I'll officially be your son, and you'll officially be our mother and grandmother. No one could ever question your place here again." The tears came then, streaming down my face as the full impact of their offer hit me. They weren't just giving me a home or a job or financial security. They were giving me a family that chose me, that wanted me, that saw me as irreplaceable. Yes, I managed through my tears. Oh yes, I would love that more than anything. Connor whooped with joy and threw his arms around me, spinning me around the kitchen until we were both laughing and crying at the same time. Derek wrapped his arms around both of us, and for a moment, we just stood there holding each other, officially becoming what we'd already been in our hearts. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Connor's friends for his party, but before we went to answer it, Derek handed me the envelope. "The papers are already prepared. We just need your signature and a court appearance. Margaret says it's just a formality. The judge will probably approve it the same day." I clutched the envelope to my chest, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were offering me. "Are you sure? Once we do this, you're stuck with me forever. No takebacks." Connor grinned and signed, "That's the whole point. No one gets to make you leave ever again." Derek's smile was soft and certain. "Marianne, you saved my son's life and gave me back my relationship with him. You've brought joy and stability and love into our house. If we're stuck with you forever, we're the luckiest people in the world." The party was a huge success. 8 of Connor's classmates came, including 2 other children with hearing impairments who'd become part of his close friend group. I watched from the kitchen as Derek effortlessly switched between speaking and signing, making sure every child felt included in the conversations and games. But the moment that made my heart swell the most came when Connor stood up to make a speech before blowing out his candles. His friends gathered around as he signed, with Derek translating for those who needed it. "I want to thank everyone for coming to my birthday party," Connor said through Derek's voice. "But mostly I want to thank my dad for learning to talk to me properly, and my grandma Marianne for teaching him how." He paused and looked directly at me. "Last year, I thought I was going to be alone forever. But then Grandma Marianne saved me at the train station, and she saved my daddy too, and now we're a real family. So this isn't just my birthday party. It's a celebration of our family." As Connor blew out his candles, I thought about the train platform where we'd met. I'd gone there that morning feeling like my life was over, like I had no purpose, no value, no future. I couldn't have imagined that the worst day of my life would lead to the best year. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Connor had been tucked into bed with his new birthday books, Derek and I sat on the back patio as we did most nights, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. "Any regrets?" Derek asked quietly. "About cutting ties with Paul? About choosing us over your biological family?" I considered the question seriously. Was I sad about losing Paul? Yes, in the way you mourn any loss, even when it's necessary. Did I regret the choice I'd made? Not for a second. "I've learned something this year," I said, settling back in my chair. "Family isn't about blood or obligation or guilt. It's about choice. It's about people who see your value and choose to keep you in their lives, not because they have to, but because they want to." "Connor asked me something yesterday that I wasn't sure how to answer," Derek said. "What was that?" "He asked if you were lonely before you came to live with us. I didn't know if that was too personal to talk about." I smiled, thinking about Connor's emotional intelligence, his ability to sense things that adults often missed. Tell him yes, I was very lonely, but also tell him that I didn't realize how lonely I was until I wasn't lonely anymore. Sometimes you don't know what you're missing until you find it. Derek nodded. He'll like that answer. He's very protective of you, you know. He told me yesterday that if anyone ever tries to hurt you again, he'll use his karate moves on them. I laughed, picturing Connor in his tiny white karate uniform, ready to defend my honor. "Well, I feel very safe then." "Marianne," Derek said, his voice growing serious, "I want you to know that this adoption isn't just a nice gesture or a way to make sure you feel secure. Connor and I genuinely can't imagine our lives without you anymore. You're not a guest or an employee or even just a friend. You're our family." "I know," I said, and I did. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly certain of my place in someone's world. You're my family too. 2 months later, I stood in a courtroom for the second time that year, but this time, the proceedings filled me with joy instead of dread. Judge Patricia Henderson reviewed our adoption petition with a warm smile, asking Derek and Connor a few routine questions about their decision. "And you, Mrs. Holloway," Judge Henderson said, turning to me, "are you prepared to accept Derek Morrison as your legal son and Connor Morrison as your legal grandson?" "Your Honor," I said, my voice strong and clear, "I can't think of anything I want more." "Then, by the power vested in me by the state, I hereby grant this petition for adult adoption. Mrs. Holloway, you are now legally Mary Ann Morrison, daughter of no one and mother to Derek Morrison, grandmother to Connor Morrison." Connor, who'd been remarkably well behaved throughout the proceedings, finally couldn't contain himself. He jumped up from his chair and signed, "Now it's official. Now it's forever." Judge Henderson laughed. "I take it the young man approves of these proceedings." "He's been counting down the days," Derek translated, grinning as Connor bounced on his toes with excitement. As we left the courthouse, I marveled at how different my life looked now compared to that terrible night at the train station 15 months earlier. Then, I had been Mary Ann Holloway, a woman with no home, no family who wanted her, and no purpose. Now I was Mary Ann Morrison, beloved mother and grandmother, valued family member, and guardian of a little boy's happiness. That evening, we celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, just the three of us, the way Connor had requested. He'd made me a card that said, "Welcome to the family, Grandma Mary Ann," in both English and sign language, decorated with drawings of the three of us holding hands. "You know what I realized today?" Connor signed as we finished our dessert. "What's that, sweetheart?" I signed back. "The tornado that destroyed your old house brought you to us. So maybe sometimes bad things happen, so good things can happen too." I looked at this wise little boy, this child who saw silver linings and hope even in stories of destruction and loss, and felt my heart overflow with love and gratitude. "I think you're absolutely right," I told him. "Sometimes the worst storms bring us exactly where we need to be." Later, as I got ready for bed in the room that was truly mine now, in the house where I truly belonged, I thought about Paul and Salem, probably getting ready for their wedding that I hadn't been invited to. I hoped they were happy. I genuinely did, but I was grateful beyond words that their rejection had forced me to find my real family. Because Connor was right. Sometimes the worst storms do bring us exactly where we need to be. And sometimes being thrown away is just the first step toward being chosen. I was exactly where I belonged, with exactly the people who valued me most. I was home. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.